The case of Karen Buckley. Karen Buckley was born in 1991 in Cork, Ireland, to John and Marion Buckley. As the youngest child and only daughter among 4 siblings, Karen grew up in a loving family. She graduated from St. Mary's Secondary School in Mallow, where her kind and caring nature made her a beloved figure. Her dedication to helping others greatly influenced her career choices. After completing her secondary education, Karen enrolled at the University of Limerick to pursue a degree in nursing. However, her fascination with occupational therapy led her to Glasgow, Scotland, where she began studying for a master's degree at Caledonian University. Karen moved to Glasgow in January 2015 and shared an apartment with 3 fellow students, all new to the city. On April 11, 2015, Karen and her flatmates visited a nightclub about 2 kilometers from their home. They arrived around 11:45 p.m. and had a great time. At around 1 a.m., Karen excused herself to use the restroom, telling her friends she would return shortly. She took her purse, but left her jacket at the table where the group was sitting. While Karen was away, her friends continued to enjoy themselves. At some point, it dawned on Karen's friends that she had been absent for too long and should have returned by then, but there was no sign of her. They searched the club thoroughly, but Karen was nowhere to be found. They tried to contact her via phone, but all attempts were unsuccessful. Her friends, who had accompanied her to the club, thought she might have gone home, despite finding it strange that she didn't say goodbye and left her jacket behind. However, when they returned home, they realized their assumptions were incorrect. Karen wasn't there either. The only explanation that occurred to them was that she might have met someone at the club and left with him. This thought lingered in their minds as they went to bed. The next day around noon, Karen's neighbors were surprised to find that she still hadn't returned home. Another attempt to reach her by phone yielded no results. Karen didn't respond to social media messages and didn't log into her accounts. Although Karen's friends had only known her for a few months, they were aware that this behavior was uncharacteristic of her. They didn't try to come up with alternative explanations to reassure themselves. Instead, they went to the police and reported her disappearance, also informing the Buckley family of the situation. The Scottish police promptly launched a search for Karen after her disappearance. Her case was publicized in the press and on television, and her parents made a heartfelt appeal to anyone with information about their daughter's whereabouts to come forward and contact the police. In the meantime, detectives scrutinized footage from cameras at the nightclub where Karen was last seen. The footage revealed that Karen had interacted with an unknown man. Within 36 hours of her disappearance on April 13th, the police identified the mystery man and brought him in for questioning. The young man, 21-year-old Alexander Pacteau, admitted to meeting Karen that night and taking her back to his apartment on Dorchester Avenue, approximately 3 kilometers from the club. He also disclosed that they had been sexually intimate. At around 4 a.m., Karen decided to leave Alexander's apartment, despite his offer to let her stay until morning. Alexander told the police that during their intimate encounter, Karen had accidentally hit her head on the corner of the bed, causing an injury and leaving marks on the sheets. The police reacted with mixed emotions to this information. On one hand, Alexander seemed to be trying to be honest, but on the other hand, it appeared as though he was trying to get ahead of the story and explain what the police might find if they searched his apartment. On the same day, April 13th, a man contacted the police to report that he had discovered a woman's purse. After investigating, it turned out that he had found it in the park near Alexander's apartment, and it belonged to Karen. The purse contained her phone and personal documents, which made Alexander's account of events more believable. It seemed possible that something had happened to Karen after she left his apartment. Meanwhile, the search for Karen remained ongoing and intense. Hundreds of police officers combed through parks, forests, bodies of water, and abandoned buildings, scouring for any clues that could aid the investigation. At this point, The police suspected only one person, Alexander Pacteau, who had been the last to see Karen. The investigators kept quiet about their prime suspect, keeping his identity under wraps. However, when they searched his apartment and the surrounding area, 2 days after Karen's disappearance, the press caught wind of it. Reporters from a local newspaper spoke to other residents of the building, and soon Alexander Pacteau's name was no longer a secret. The police secured a search warrant for Pacteau's apartment, and upon entering, they were struck by the overpowering smell of bleach. They also noticed that the mattress on his bed was the wrong size, and small, dark red spots were found on the bed and in the bathroom, which were sent for analysis. Additionally, the officers discovered a box of tools and a large stash of cleaning supplies in the apartment. A police dog, trained to detect human remains, indicated the presence of a body near Alexander Pacteau's car. While awaiting a search warrant for the vehicle, detectives discovered that Pacteau had taken his car to a detailing salon the previous day, but the service was subpar. During the subsequent search, small dark red spots were found on the inside of the passenger door, which were sent to the laboratory for analysis. As each new piece of evidence emerged, suspicions grew that Karen was no longer alive, but the search for her continued. Journalists managed to uncover the suspect's identity, and the next day, Alexander Pacteau's photograph was featured on the front page of a newspaper. Ironically, this move by the press proved beneficial to the investigation. A man who recognized Pacteau's photo in the newspaper contacted the police and provided crucial information. He revealed that he had worked with Alexander in the past and knew that Pacteau rented a warehouse on a farm outside Glasgow, approximately 9 kilometers from his apartment. Any lead was significant, and the police investigated the obtained information. The farm owner confirmed that he rents a storage space to Pacteau for £10 a week. Inside the space, investigators found a 200-liter drum containing Karen's body, which had been dissolved in caustic soda, a highly reactive alkaline substance capable of breaking down organic compounds. They also discovered remnants of a mattress that Pacteau had attempted to burn on a bonfire. On the same day, April 15th, Pacteau was arrested on suspicion of involvement in Karen Buckley's case. Realizing the significant amount of evidence against him, he confessed to taking Karen's life, although he claimed it was in self-defense. A timeline of events was constructed based on evidence gathered by the police and the suspect's testimony, detailing the nights when Pacteau killed Karen and attempted to conceal his actions. On the night of April 11 to 12th, around 1 a.m., Karen left the club, but the reason for her departure remains unclear. Her friends reported no argument and stated that Karen said she would go to the bathroom and return. Even if she had decided to go home, it is unclear why she left her jacket behind. The police reviewed approximately 1,900 hours of surveillance footage and found a recording that showed Karen crossing paths with Pacteau after leaving the club. The two had a brief conversation before walking together in the direction of his parked car. It is believed that Pacteau offered to drive Karen to her apartment, but instead, he attacked her once they got into the car. Pacteau struck Karen 14 times on the head with a large wrench, resulting in her death in his car. The dark red stains found in the car, bathroom, and on Pacteau's bed were later determined to be dry drops of Karen's blood. After getting rid of the girl, he started planning his next moves. He first disposed of Karen's purse, which was later found and handed over to the police at around 2 a.m. Afterwards, he went back home, and what he did next shocked the detectives. At 8 a.m., he moved the body from the car to his apartment. Using his phone, he started searching online for information about caustic soda. Then he went to a shopping center where he bought 6 liters of caustic soda, a respirator, and gloves at 9:42 a.m. Thinking that 6 liters wouldn't be enough, he stopped at another store on his way home and bought more caustic soda. When he got back to his apartment, he put Karen's body in the bathtub, attempting to get rid of it. However, he knew his neighbor, who lived nearby, was supposed to return home around 8 p.m., and he realized he wouldn't have enough time to complete his plan. So, he took the body out of the bathtub, wrapped it in a blanket, and hid it in his bedroom. The day after, on April 13th, he threw a wrench into the River Clyde, where it was later found by divers. Then, he went to a nearby shopping center, about 1.5 miles from his home, and asked a consultant for help. Specifically, he requested a product recommendation for removing bloodstains from a mattress. On the same day, he also purchased 2 padlocks. Next, he took Karen's mattress, bedding, and clothes to a farm, where he burned all of them. On his way back home, he bought a barrel, which he would later use to store the body. At around 2 p.m., he took the barrel to a rented warehouse, poured in the remaining caustic soda, and locked the gate with the 2 padlocks he had purchased. Then, he went back home. At 6 p.m., the police visited him at his home and took him in for questioning. As we know, he eventually confessed to his guilt. However, his motive remained unclear. Pacto claimed that he killed Karen in self-defense during an argument that broke out in the car, but investigators did not believe this story, as it seemed like an attempt to justify his actions. The police assumed that by killing Karen and disposing of her body, Pacto was trying to cover up another crime. However, due to the degree of decomposition, experts could not determine if Karen had been subjected to violence before her death. In September 2015, Alexander Pacto was convicted of murder and received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after serving 23 years. Through his lawyer, Pacto expressed remorse to the Buckley family, claiming he was deeply sorry for his actions. Pacto explained to his defense attorney that he was heavily intoxicated on the night of the incident and had no recollection of why he killed Karen. Notably, if Pacto had not entered a guilty plea, he would have been eligible for parole after 25 years, rather than 23. The case of Alice Adams and Tibor Vass. Tibor was born and raised in Budapest, Hungary, as the second child to his parents and had a younger sister. He had a strong affinity for socializing and was musically inclined, able to play almost any instrument, with the piano being his favorite. He taught his sister Isabella how to play the piano, and they would often sing and play together while their parents listened in. After the sudden loss of his father in 2007, Tibor, his sister Isabella, and their mother Rosalia struggled to cope. Tibor spent most of his free time with his sister and began working full-time at the age of 15 in 2008. He applied to the University of Budapest, hoping that obtaining a college degree would lead to a decent job and better financial support for his mother. Despite his exceptional talent, he was denied admission to the university. This led Tibor to discuss moving to Great Britain with his mother, who seemingly supported the idea. Tibor subsequently moved to the United Kingdom in July 2010, at the age of 19. He settled in London and began working at the Radisson Blu Edwardian Heathrow Hotel. Tibor thoroughly enjoyed his job, his responsibilities, his co-workers, and the new clients he met daily. Alice was a talented musician who quickly formed a strong bond with Tibor, as they always found something to discuss. Alice Adams and Tibor Vass worked as receptionists at the hotel, alongside Attila, a 31-year-old who had been employed there the longest and had been recognized as the best employee of 2010. Like Tibor, Attila was from Hungary, which had brought them closer together. The hotel provided apartments for its incoming employees, and Attila and Tibor took advantage of this convenient arrangement, living in a house behind the hotel. This saved them money and reduced their commute time. Although Tibor was happy to be in England, he didn't give up on his plans for higher education. He reapplied to the university in Budapest and was finally accepted. Overjoyed, he was set to return to Hungary in August 2011. To mark Tibor's departure, the hotel employees organized a small farewell party on August 9, 2011. The gathering was attended by Tibor, Attila, Alice, and other hotel staff. The next day, the trio was scheduled to work, but all three failed to show up. When they didn't arrive by 7 a.m., their colleagues became concerned and alerted the authorities. The The police were notified at 7:53 a.m. Upon arriving at the house, the officers found the door unlocked, but there was no response when they knocked. When one of the officers entered, he was met with a disturbing scene. Alice lay on the living room floor, her face concealed by a pillow. A subsequent autopsy revealed 22 stab wounds on her body. In the bedroom, Tibor's naked body lay on the bed, having succumbed to 2 stab wounds to the heart. Attila, however, was nowhere to be found. The police cordoned off the house, and investigators and forensic experts launched their investigation. As they examined the crime scene, they noticed that the bed where Tibor's body lay was not where he had died. The bed was too clean, suggesting that the perpetrator had inflicted Tibor's fatal wounds elsewhere, then stripped him, cleaned him up, and placed him on the bed. The apartment yielded evidence of a party, including alcohol bottles and illegal substances. Despite a thorough search of the house, surrounding area, and attic, police were unable to find Attila Ban, but they did find his personal belongings, including his papers, still in the apartment. Attila became the prime suspect, and as experts continued to process the crime scene, investigators began interviewing his co-workers. They learned that Attila had taken Tibor under his wing as soon as Tibor started working at the hotel, given their shared nationality. Attila soon invited Tibor to move in with him in an apartment near the hotel, and even adjusted their work schedules so they would be on the same shift. Tibor, a young and attractive man, had plenty of female admirers. However, Attila Ban, who openly identified as gay, had developed romantic feelings for Tibor. According to hotel staff, Tibor consistently rebuffed Attila's advances, leaving Attila unhappy. 3 weeks prior to her murder, Alice started working at the hotel, and Tibor began to show interest in her. This naturally upset Attila, who was jealous despite knowing that Tibor only dated women. The investigators wondered, could Attila's jealousy and unrequited love have driven him to commit the crime? Even before the police discovered the bodies of Tibor Voss and Alice Adams, Attila Ban had posted an ominous message on his Facebook page. The message, "I would like to wake up from that nightmare," was posted at 6:23 a.m., prompting concerned comments from friends that went unanswered. This message further implicated Attila Ban in the murders of his colleagues. The brutality of the crime scene also pointed to Attila's involvement. Alice suffered 22 stab wounds, while Tibor was stabbed twice. Additionally, Alice was found lying on the floor with a pillow over her face, while Tibor's body was on the bed. The investigators spoke with the other party members, who revealed that when everyone else departed, Attila, Tibor, and Alice were the only ones remaining in the apartment. This suggested that a significant event had occurred involving these 3 individuals in the time leading up to dawn. The news of Tibor and Alice's deaths was devastating to both the Adams and Vass families. In a statement, Alice's mother, Sarah, paid tribute to her daughter, saying, "Her loss is a tragedy beyond expression." Alice's mother told the investigators that Alice had sent a text message around midnight saying she would be staying overnight at a friend's house. The police then issued an all-points bulletin for Attila, but he appeared to have vanished without leaving any clues. They tried to track his phone and found that it was connected to cell towers near the hotel, which was strange. It was later discovered that Attila had been much closer to them than anyone had suspected the whole time. The investigation team spent 2 days at the scene before leaving the house. A few hours later, the forensic team returned to the house to conduct further tests. Upon arrival, they noticed that the door they had left open was now locked from the inside. When they entered the room, they found Attila lying on the bed, intoxicated and having attempted to harm himself with scissors and a knife. He had visible wounds on his neck and wrists. When questioned, Attila behaved strangely, using gestures to try to convey something. He was taken to the hospital, where doctors ensured that his life was not in danger. The police were baffled by Attila's whereabouts during the past 2 days, only to discover that he had been hiding in the sofa bed where Tibor Voss's body was found. Attila had created a slit in the base of the sofa, taken a phone and several bottles of water, and climbed inside while the police were investigating the scene. From his hiding spot, he was able to listen and watch the police through the holes he had made. Attila was eventually arrested at the hospital and became the prime suspect. The trial began on July 9, 2012, and as it progressed, more details about the brutal crime emerged. It was revealed that the party had spiraled out of control after Alice, Tibor, and Attila were left alone in the apartment. During the trial, it was established that there was sexual activity between all three, as evidenced by DNA from both men found on Miss Adams' breasts. Attila claimed to remember the three of them being in bed together, but he had no recollection of what happened afterwards. He claimed that he didn't realize the gravity of his actions until the next morning, when he woke up to find Alice and Tibor's lifeless bodies. Overcome with guilt, he wanted to take his own life, but he was too afraid to do it alone. Instead, he cut off Tibor's clothes and climbed into the bathtub with him, unable to bring himself to harm himself. He later moved Tibor's body to the bed and, aware that people would be looking for them, hid inside the base of the bed. While in hiding, he even managed to update his Facebook page. The defendant broke down in tears in the courtroom as prosecutor Richard Whittam presented the facts of the case to the jury. Tibor Vas had previously been in relationships with women who worked at the hotel, and there is no evidence to suggest he had a romantic relationship with Attila. However, Attila seemed to have strong feelings for Tibor and had exhibited possessive behavior towards him. The court was told that Attila was jealous of Vas and, just days before the crime, had thrown a tantrum during a team-building exercise when he wasn't included in a photo with his victim. The situation escalated to a critical point when Attila discovered that Tibor Vas had been accepted into a university program in Hungary and was planning to leave Britain by the end of the month. This news might have been the trigger that pushed Attila over the edge, as he couldn't bear the sight of Tibor and Alice kissing, and in a fit of jealousy, he killed them both. Prosecutor Richard Whittam revealed in his court statement that Attila was found naked on the single bed, with wounds on his wrists, forearm, and neck. It became clear that he had been hiding in the base of the double bed's divan, and he must have remained there undetected throughout the pathologist's examination, the removal of the bodies, and the crime scene investigation by forensic experts. Despite being in a state of turmoil, Attila had the presence of mind to conceal himself effectively and avoid detection during the entire time the authorities were present at the scene. After the case, Detective Inspector John Finch addressed the media outside the courtroom, defending the police's decision not to search under the bed. "I have reviewed this case multiple times with senior management," he said. "It's unbelievable that someone would hide under a bed. It's such an unusual and bizarre behavior." Finch explained that crime scene examiners would compromise crucial forensic evidence if they routinely lifted up beds to look for people who were not likely to be there. On August 11th, Rosalia received the devastating news that her 20-year-old son, Tibor, and his friend Alice had been murdered. It was unthinkable and heart-wrenching to accept that such a tragedy could occur. Rosalia had previously taken comfort in knowing that Tibor had found a reliable and trustworthy friend in London who was mature, friendly, and intelligent. This friend had personally promised Rosalia that he would look out for her son and ensure his safety. Rosalia had trusted him implicitly and regarded him as a member of her own family. This made the news of Tibor's murder all the more crushing. Throughout the police investigation and trial, Rosalia was forced to relive the horrors of that fateful night, which only intensified her grief. The agony and loss that the family has had to endure for the rest of their lives is indescribable. Attila Bond, whose name is actually Attila Bond, pleaded guilty to a crime but claimed he had no memory of the horrific events that occurred on July 18, 2012. After deliberating for only 5 hours, the jury delivered a verdict on August 17th, finding the 32-year-old guilty. As a result, he was given 2 life sentences and will be required to serve at least 26 years in prison before becoming eligible to request parole. The case of Jennifer Wilbanks. Jennifer Carol Wilbanks was born on February 28, 1973, and had lived her whole life in Georgia, surrounded by her family, friends, and work. In Duluth, she met her 32-year-old fiancé, John Mason, whose family was financially well off. The Masons owned a private medical clinic in Duluth, and those who knew John described him as a kind and caring man who was always willing to lend a helping hand. After a year of dating, John and Jennifer seemed like the perfect couple, and their friends and family were overjoyed when they announced their engagement. Wedding preparations were underway, with a lavish ceremony planned for April 30th, 2005, a Saturday, and several hundred guests invited. But just 4 days before the wedding, on Tuesday, April 26th, John Mason reported Jennifer missing to the police, stating that she had gone out for an evening run and failed to return. He had tried to find her on his own, but was unsuccessful, leading him to seek help from law enforcement. The next day, April 27th, a massive search effort was launched, involving over 300 police officers and volunteers. They combed through the wooded areas and water bodies along Jennifer's intended running route. Given the urgency of the situation, even off-duty officers were called in to assist. On the same day, one of the search teams stumbled upon potential clues, including clothing, sneakers, and a strand of long dark hair. All of these findings were promptly sent to the lab for thorough examination. In an effort to gather more information, Jennifer's family created and distributed flyers featuring her photo, hoping someone might have seen her or have crucial details to share with investigators. The media picked up the story, and billboards bearing Jennifer's image started appearing around the city. As part of their investigation, police searched the home Jennifer shared with John, although this was largely a formality. Detectives didn't uncover anything suspicious at the couple's residence. On Thursday, April 28th, Major Donald Woodruff of the Duluth Police Department declared that Jennifer Wilbanks' disappearance was being investigated as a criminal case, with the FBI and Georgia Bureau of Investigation participating. Despite a second day of searching, no trace of Jennifer was found. Her family was left stunned by her sudden disappearance and did everything possible to help find her. They asked radio and TV stations to broadcast the story of Jennifer's vanishing, suspecting that she might have been kidnapped and taken to another state. They made a plea to the possible kidnapper to release her. The cable news channel gave the incident extensive coverage. The big question on everyone's mind was, where was Jennifer? Had some terrible incident occurred? It was unusual for her not to take her personal keys, and her wedding, which was to be attended by 28 chaperones and 600 guests, was just 4 days away. It was also out of character for Jennifer not to contact her family, her distraught relatives emphasized in press conferences and interviews. As the last person to see Jennifer alive, John inevitably became a suspect when the search failed to turn up any leads. The detectives were determined to find out whether this outwardly law-abiding citizen, known for his gentle nature and regular church attendance, was concealing something. They asked John to take a police lie detector test, but he refused, instead opting for a private polygraph examination in the presence of his lawyer. The results of this test were shared with the police, but this unusual step only heightened the detectives' suspicions about John. In the end, the test results failed to provide any concrete proof of John's involvement in his fiancée's disappearance. In an effort to uncover a potential motive for Jennifer's disappearance, detectives conducted a thorough search of the couple's home, seizing 3 computers in the process. Notably, no signs of a struggle or evidence of a crime were found within the house. On April 29th, the day before Jennifer's wedding, her relatives offered a $100,000 reward for any information leading to her discovery, alive or deceased. The same day, police officials announced that they would be halting the active search efforts during a press conference. According to the local police chief, every possible lead had been exhaustively explored in the area, but no concrete clues or evidence had been uncovered, prompting the decision to cease the search. John Mason attended the press conference, but declined to speak to reporters. Jennifer's uncle speculated that John was simply at a loss for words, which did little to dispel the growing suspicions surrounding his involvement in his fiancee's disappearance. Meanwhile, authorities revealed that the clothes, shoes, and lock of hair discovered on the first day of the search were unrelated to Jennifer's disappearance and were merely discarded litter. With John being the only suspect with a potential motive, journalists began to camp outside his residence and closely tail him, convinced of his involvement in the bride's disappearance, though concrete proof remained elusive. On April 30th, rather than attending a wedding, a gathering took place where people came together to pray for Jennifer's safe return. The evening prior, on April 29th, John received a mysterious phone call from an unknown number. When he answered, he was left almost speechless, as it was Jennifer on the other end, her voice shaking as she revealed she had been kidnapped and taken to an unknown location, where she was forced into intimate acts against her will. She was crying, explaining that she had been released, but was now disoriented and lost. Jennifer quickly phoned the emergency services, telling the operator that she had been kidnapped and then released, but she wasn't sure where she was. The police were able to trace the call to a public phone booth in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which was over 1,400 miles away from Duluth, Georgia. The police rushed to the phone booth and found Jennifer waiting for them when they arrived. Jennifer's family thanked everyone involved, including the media, for persuading the supposed kidnapper to release her. However, when the police took her to the station, they were surprised by the difference between her appearance and her account of what happened. She said she was held captive by a man and woman in their 40s who tied up her hands and feet in a blue van. But FBI agents who interviewed Jennifer soon found problems with her story, and when they asked her about these problems, she admitted there was no kidnapping on April 26th. She told them she had lied to her fiancé John, saying she was going for a run, but really she had taken a bus from the station to New Mexico. Jennifer said she did this because she felt overwhelmed by the pressure and excitement of her upcoming wedding. News outlets revealed a pattern of criminal conduct in Jennifer's past. In 1996, she faced 3 separate shoplifting charges involving stolen goods worth $37 in total. The next year, at 24, she was accused of stealing $1,740 worth of merchandise from a supermarket. She reimbursed the damages and was sentenced to community service, following which the theft charges were dropped. In 1998, Jennifer was caught stealing again, causing $98 in damages. Furthermore, she was accused of stealing from the homes of families who had hired her as a nanny. Although she was involved in these incidents, she managed to avoid imprisonment because her thefts were considered petty. After her kidnapping story ended, all was well in some sense. Jennifer was found safe and sound, but the state of Georgia had spent almost $60,000 looking for her. After being rescued, Jennifer returned to Duluth on April 30th to escape the media frenzy and public attention at the airport. She covered her head with a plaid cloth to avoid attention, and the planned wedding, scheduled for that day, was indefinitely postponed. The real reason Jennifer left Georgia was the overwhelming pressure of the wedding. According to Officer Michael Medrano, Jennifer felt overwhelmed by her long to-do list with no time to complete it. It turns out that Jennifer simply couldn't handle the stress of the large wedding. Duluth Police Chief Randy Belcher clarified that John, the groom, had nothing to do with Jennifer's disappearance, contrary to rumors and baseless accusations, and was left as an abandoned bridegroom. Jennifer became known as the runaway bride after abandoning her wedding. She publicly apologized to her family, friends, and the local community. When John and Jennifer reunited, the first thing he did was return the engagement ring she had left behind, demonstrating his continued desire to marry her. John explained, "My commitment to Jennifer wasn't about the wedding ceremony or the 500 guests. It was about the promise I made to her when I gave her the ring." Jennifer sought medical treatment on May 9, 2005, to address the physical and mental health issues that contributed to her departure. Later, on May 25, 2005, she was charged with making false statements about her disappearance. The charge carried a potential 5-year prison sentence. As part of a plea deal, Jennifer pleaded guilty to perjury on June 2, 2005, and received a 2-year probation sentence and 120 hours of community service. She was also ordered to pay $15,000 in restitution to the city for expenses incurred during the search for her. The story doesn't end there. In September 2006, Jennifer took legal action against her former fiancé, John Mason, after they had ended their engagement and gone their separate ways. During her treatment, Jennifer had granted John power of attorney, allowing him to act on her behalf. She alleged that John sold the rights to their story to Reagan Media for $500,000 and used the money to buy a house, which was registered in his name alone. After their breakup, John evicted Jennifer from the house. In her lawsuit, Jennifer sought $250,000 as her share of the house's value and an additional $250,000 in damages. In response, John countersued, citing emotional distress from being left at the altar and accusing Jennifer of being involved in her own disappearance. In December 2006, Jennifer and her former fiancé dropped their lawsuits against each other, reportedly settling their differences out of court. As a result of the widespread media attention she received, not just in the US but around the world, Jennifer became briefly famous, and some companies saw an opportunity to profit from her notoriety. The Runaway Bride saga also inspired a limited edition action figure and a brand of hot sauce called Jennifer's Hightail and Hot Sauce. A musical play based on Jennifer's story premiered on March 13, 2008, at the Red Clay Theater in Duluth, Georgia. In addition, a photo of Jennifer appeared in the trailer for the 2008 poker movie, The Grand, depicting her as one of the many women who had been married to Woody Harrelson's character. Meanwhile, John Mason, who had previously invested heavily in their failed wedding, married another woman in a low-key ceremony at his parents' home in Duluth in 2008. Jennifer eventually got married in 2010, but unfortunately her marriage ended in divorce 11 years later. Today, she still resides in Georgia. The case of Natasha Cournoyer. Natasha Cournoyer, a 37-year-old woman, disappeared mysteriously. She didn't visit her mother, didn't answer phone calls, and wasn't at home. Her friends and colleagues didn't see her that day either. By 5 p.m., her relatives reported her missing, and the police launched an investigation. As a public relations specialist, Natasha worked for the Correctional Service of Canada. The detectives started by visiting her workplace to interview her colleagues. They discovered Natasha's car still parked nearby, with a man named Michel Trottier lingering around it. Appearing nervous, Trottier claimed to have a romantic relationship with Natasha and was trying to figure out where she might have gone. Scratches were found on the back door of Natasha's car, but it was unclear whether they were related to her disappearance or had existed before. The detectives didn't find any reason to suspect Trottier's involvement in Natasha's disappearance. After conducting interviews with Natasha's coworkers, investigators learned that she was at work on October 1, 2009, the day before she vanished. Her colleagues reported that her behavior that day was completely normal. She was in a good mood and interacted with them in a friendly manner, as she always did. Natasha had scheduled a day off for October 2nd to take care of some personal business related to her father's recent passing. She needed to finalize arrangements for his tombstone. As a result, she stayed at the office longer than usual on October 1st, ultimately leaving the building around 8 p.m. Natasha's friends portrayed her as a kind and open person who didn't have any conflicts or enemies. She worked in an office environment and didn't have any involvement with prisoners, making it hard to imagine anyone holding a grudge against her. The police launched a massive search operation to locate Natasha Cornoyer, deploying both air and canine units. They scoured the area surrounding the parking lot, but unfortunately did not uncover any leads that could aid the investigation. Meanwhile, Natasha's friends and family distributed flyers featuring her photo, hoping that someone might have information about her disappearance or have seen her. The initial hours following a person's disappearance are crucial, as this is when witnesses or evidence are most likely to be found. However, in Natasha's case, valuable time was lost because the police didn't receive the report until the evening of October 2nd, a full 21 hours after she had left her workplace. Natasha's family offered a $10,000 reward for any information that could help locate her. Michel Trottier, Natasha's boyfriend, suspected she had been kidnapped and made a televised plea to her possible abductor, asking them to release her. Meanwhile, the police investigated Michelle and Natasha's personal lives, discovering that they had been in a troubled on-again, off-again relationship for 4 years. The police explored all possible scenarios behind Natasha's disappearance. After reviewing CCTV footage, the police were able to piece together Natasha's final day at work. She arrived at the building at 9:04 a.m. and left at 8:07 p.m., heading towards her parked car in a poorly lit area of the parking lot. At some point, Natasha vanished into the darkness. A few minutes later, the car's headlights turned on, and the vehicle began moving in the opposite direction of the exit. It stopped in another poorly lit area, and the headlights went out. The car remained there for about 20 minutes before moving towards the exit. However, it was not Natasha's Mazda. It was determined from other records that a Ford Windstar minivan appeared on the video. Further investigation revealed that this vehicle entered the parking lot at 6:35 p.m. and parked beside Natasha's car. Based on the video evidence, the police suspected that Natasha Cornoyer's disappearance was likely a kidnapping. By the 5th day of the search, on October 6, 2009, the investigation shifted from a missing person case to a homicide. Natasha's body was discovered in a vacant lot in the Pointe-aux-Trembles area, approximately 20 miles from her workplace. The body was found adjacent to a dirt road leading to the riverbank. Natasha's death sent shockwaves through her family and friends. The details of the medical examiner's report only made things worse. The cause of death was strangulation, but that was only the final act. Before that, she had been punched in the face 9 times, breaking her nose. Her wrists and ankles bore marks, indicating she had been restrained at some point. The presence of seminal fluid provided a DNA sample. As the detectives waited for the DNA analysis results, they focused on identifying the owner of the minivan seen on the day Natasha vanished. In 2009, 2 motels operated near her workplace. 10 days after the body was discovered, on October 16, 2009, police visited both motels, reviewing the guest registration cards. At the Lido Motel, they found a guest who had listed a Ford Windstar as his vehicle on the day Natasha Cornoyer went missing. The man was identified as 48-year-old Claude LaRouche, a registered sex offender with a criminal history. He had served 2 prison sentences, 1 year in prison plus 2 years of probation in 1993 for forcing a 19-year-old acquaintance into sexual intercourse, and 40 months in prison in 2005 for attempting to kidnap a 7-year-old girl who managed to escape his grasp and run to a neighbor's house. By November 2008, LaRouche was out of prison. He started working as a carpenter and got married to a woman with 2 sons in 2009. The family lived together in a house just a 10-minute drive from the parking lot where Natasha Cornoyer went missing. In their investigation, detectives found that LaRouche had checked into a motel on the night Natasha disappeared. They called in forensic experts to examine the motel room, where they discovered dark red stains on the carpet that had been poorly cleaned. The stains were sent for analysis. On the same day, detectives visited LaRouche's residence to question him. Since he had a prior criminal record, his DNA was already on file with the police. However, they needed time to compare it with the DNA evidence collected from Natasha's body. LaRouche claimed he didn't know Natasha Cournoyer, but admitted to frequenting the Lido Motel due to its affordability. He stated that he was unhappy with his marital life and would often rent a room at the motel to engage in paid sexual services. When asked about his whereabouts on October 1st, the day Natasha went missing, LaRouche said he had no recollection, including whether he had stayed at the Lido Motel that day. He attributed this memory gap to excessive drug use, but his memory suddenly returned a month later, on November 5, 2009. After the detectives revisited LaRouche, the DNA analysis revealed that the seminal fluid found on Natasha Cournoyer's body belonged to him. Furthermore, Natasha's DNA was discovered in the motel room he rented and inside his car. According to the Montreal police, there was no connection between the crime and Cournoyer's job as a communications officer for the Correctional Service of Canada, and the victim did not know the suspect. LaRouche's neighbors were shocked and disturbed by his arrest, describing him as a friendly and polite person. On November 6, 2009, Claude LaRouche was identified as a suspect in the disappearance and suspected murder of Natasha Cournoyer. Initially, he denied any involvement or wrongdoing, but later, faced with overwhelming evidence, he confessed to taking Natasha's life. However, he claimed that her death was unintentional and accidental. During the 2011 trial, two conflicting versions of events emerged, one from Claude LaRouche and his lawyers, and another from the prosecutor. According to LaRouche's testimony, he was waiting for a drug dealer in a parking lot when Natasha appeared beside him. LaRouche claimed that he attacked Natasha, forced her into his car, and drove to a motel where Natasha supposedly offered to comply with his demands in exchange for her freedom. Conveniently, LaRouche said he experienced memory lapses, remembering only the details that supported his innocence. LaRouche's account continued, stating that a dispute broke out in the motel room, causing him to lose control and attack Natasha, eventually strangling her. Afterwards, he cleaned the room, placed Natasha's body in his car, drove home, and went to bed. The next morning, when the effects of the drugs he had taken wore off, LaRouche realized the severity of his actions and decided to dispose of the body. He shredded Natasha's documents and bank cards, throwing them out of his car window while driving to the location where her body was eventually found. To clarify, this is Claude LaRouche's version of events, which raised many doubts as he continued to speak. According to LaRouche, he returned to the body the day after disposing of it, covering it with a blanket because he feared Natasha might freeze. The following day, he went back to retrieve the blanket, allegedly because he was concerned that the blanket would delay the discovery of Natasha's body. In summary, Claude LaRouche's account of events is plagued by inconsistencies and illogical actions, which were likely caused by his impaired mental state. Notably, LaRouche repeatedly emphasized during the trial that he never intended to harm Natasha. The prosecution built a strong case based on material evidence, which was corroborated by a key eyewitness. This witness testified that he was walking his dog near the parking lot on the day Natasha Cournoyer disappeared. He claimed to have seen Claude LaRouche attempting to attack a jogger, but LaRouche fled the scene when he noticed the witness and his dog. This incident occurred around 7 p.m., approximately an hour before Natasha Cournoyer was attacked. According to the prosecutor, LaRouche tied Natasha up and forcibly took her to a motel where she was eventually killed. In June 2011, the court found Claude LaRouche guilty and sentenced him to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 25 years. During the trial, it was revealed that Claude LaRouche had attempted to strangle another woman, Dominique Martel, just 2 weeks after attacking Natasha Cournoyer. Martel defended herself by biting his finger, managing to fight him off. As a result, LaRouche was classified as a dangerous criminal under Canadian law, implying he will likely remain incarcerated indefinitely with little chance of early release. Natasha led a happy, quiet life filled with dreams and ambitions. However, her life was tragically cut short by a man with a history of serious crimes who was free to roam among the public despite his record. Her family and friends cannot help but wonder how an individual who had previously attempted to kidnap a 7-year-old girl was allowed to walk free. They question why no one was monitoring him. If the system had functioned differently and LaRouche had been imprisoned as he should have been, Natasha might still be alive today. The case of Canny Ong. Canny Ong Lay Kian was born in Malaysia on July 18, 1974, to a close-knit family with one older sister. She shared a particularly strong bond with her parents. In 1995, she moved to the USA to pursue higher education and a career in information technology. It was there that she met Brandon, a US citizen of Singaporean Chinese descent, whose parents had emigrated over 20 years prior. Their initial friendship blossomed into romance, with Brandon becoming a constant source of support and encouragement in Canny's life. The couple tied the knot in 2001, and Canny seemed to have achieved everything she had ever dreamed of in both her professional and personal life. By 2003, Canny was working as an analyst in San Diego, planning her future with Brandon and hoping to start a family. However, a series of events that year took a devastating turn. Canny's father, Ong Bijang, was diagnosed with cancer, prompting Canny to return to Malaysia to care for him and support her family during this difficult time. On June 1, 2003, Canny arrived in Malaysia with Brandon, who returned to the USA a few days later. Canny remained in Kuala Lumpur, dedicating herself to her father's care at a clinic in the capital. Despite the distance, Canny and Brandon remained close, spending hours on the phone every day, discussing everything from their daily lives to their two beloved cats, whom Canny jokingly scolded Brandon for overfeeding. Their conversations were almost like those of parents discussing their children. Canny's father had undergone a kidney removal surgery, but fortunately, his health was steadily improving, and he was on the road to recovery. This prompted Canny to plan her return to the USA on June 14, 2003. The evening before her flight, on June 13, 2003, Canny organized a farewell dinner at a restaurant situated in a popular mall. She invited her mother, Pearlie, her sister Elsie, and close friends to join her. When Canny and her mother arrived at the restaurant, they were running late because they had struggled to find a parking spot on the street in front of the mall. Canny had to drive into the underground parking lot, which came with a fee. However, her mother's concern was not about the cost, but rather the poor lighting in the parking area. After parking their car, they made their way to the second floor, where the restaurant was located. Canny was thrilled to see her childhood friends, and they had a lot to talk about and catch up on. A few hours into dinner, Canny noticed her grandmother, Pearlie, looked tired. She asked her mother if Pearlie wanted to go home, and Pearlie replied that she had a very busy day ahead, but didn't mind leaving, telling her friends she would be back soon. Canny, her mother, and her sister Elsie then headed to the payment terminal to pay for their parking. The terminal was located on the first floor of the mall, while the parking was underground. As they stood in the queue, Canny realized she had left the parking ticket in the car. She told her sister and mother to stay in line and went down to retrieve the ticket. By the time she returned, the queue had disappeared, but her sister and mother were already gone. After 10 more minutes, Elsie started calling Canny, but the first call went unanswered, and the second one was redirected to voicemail. Something was clearly amiss. Elsie and Pearlie rushed to the parking lot, only to find that Canny's car was gone. They searched the area repeatedly, but Canny had vanished with the vehicle. Pearlie was convinced that something was wrong, as Canny would never drive off without a word. The parking lot's poor lighting made it difficult to see, but the surveillance cameras could provide some clues. Initially, the mall security was hesitant to share the footage with Canny's family, but they eventually relented after her mother's desperate pleas. Around midnight, Pearlie and Elsie watched the footage, which left them stunned and confirmed their worst fears. The footage showed Canny's car speeding out of the underground parking lot with someone else behind the wheel. Although the quality was poor, it was clear that the driver was likely a man, and Canny sat beside him in the passenger seat, pressed against the door, trying to keep herself as far away from him as possible. After watching the footage, Pearlie rushed to a police station and filed a report on her daughter's disappearance and suspected kidnapping. The police launched an investigation, and Canny's family and friends frantically searched for her in Kuala Lumpur, scanning the area for her distinctive purple proton tiara. As the search continued, Brandon, Canny's husband, grew increasingly concerned. He repeatedly tried calling his wife's number, but couldn't get through. He then phoned her mother, who broke the disturbing news to him. Brandon was devastated by Canny's disappearance, and Pearlie could hear his sobs over the phone. As dawn broke, Canny's friends and relatives reluctantly ended their search, feeling defeated and hopeless. The police were disseminating information about Canny's disappearance and conducting their own investigation, but so far, there were no promising leads. The footage from the mall's parking lot where Canny was last seen did not provide any leads on the identity of the driver. It had been more than 72 hours since Canny's family and friends had last seen her, and it was clear to the authorities that if she had indeed been kidnapped, it was not for financial gain. If money was the motive, the kidnapper would have already contacted them demanding a ransom. The lack of progress in the case was ominous. That same day, the police made a disturbing discovery. Canny's car was found abandoned on a city street. The front right tire was in a terrible state, indicating that it had been driven while flat for some time, eventually shredding it. In the back of the car, on the passenger seat, there was a large red stain. Forensic experts collected evidence from the car, including scrapings from the back seat and fingerprints from the steering wheel and other areas. The vehicle held a lot of clues, which will be examined in more detail later. Canny's family and friends held on to hope, praying for her safe return. But their hopes were devastatingly crushed the next day, after the car was found. On June 17th, a road worker noticed a strong, foul smell emanating from a nearby manhole along a highway. Upon lifting the lid, he was met with the horrific sight of a body being burned using 2 car tires and sticks. A team of top forensic experts from the Royal Malaysian Police rushed to the scene. The body was concealed under 2 car tires filled with concrete, which were originally used as road sign stands. Whoever hid it there had attempted to make identification more difficult. Although the family's worst fears seemed confirmed, Canny's mother, Pearlie, refused to accept her daughter's death until officially confirmed. Until then, they would continue to hold on to hope that she would miraculously reappear alive. The family went to the morgue, but the doctor told them they still couldn't confirm the body was Canny's. To investigate, family members provided DNA samples for a comparative analysis. The test results confirmed their worst fears. The body was indeed their daughter's. Although some reports suggest that the family identified the jewelry on the body even before the DNA test, Canny's mother, Pearlie, held on to hope that her daughter was alive until the very end. It's impossible to imagine the emotional turmoil she endured. The autopsy revealed that Canny suffered 2 stab wounds to her abdomen. Additionally, a medical forensics expert found signs of strangulation, including a cloth tied around her neck in multiple knots. Furthermore, semen was found inside her body, which served as a source of DNA evidence. A few days after Canny's body was discovered, a significant event raised concerns about the effectiveness of law enforcement agencies. Undercover policeman Subramaniam Ravichandran reported to his superiors that on the night of Canny's disappearance, he and his partner were on patrol in Kuala Lumpur, riding a motorcycle and dressed in civilian clothes. They came across a car parked incorrectly, taking up half of the road, and decided to investigate. As they approached the driver's door, Ravichandran saw a man behind the wheel and a woman sitting next to him. He knocked on the window, and when the man rolled it down partway, Ravichandran showed him his police ID and asked what they were doing. The driver claimed they were just chatting and not doing anything illegal. Ravichandran then asked to see their IDs. While the driver handed over the documents, the woman in the passenger seat made strange hand gestures, appearing to signal for help whenever the driver turned his head away from her. Having noticed a problem, the officer asked the driver to get out of the car. However, the driver responded aggressively, claiming that Ravichandran was not a police officer, but a thief. Before leaving, he rolled up the window and reached for the ignition key. Fearing the car would drive off, the policeman drew his pistol and shot out the right front tire. Despite this, the car sped away. Ravichandran and his partner gave chase on their motorcycle, but curiously, they were unable to catch up to the car, even though it had a flat tire. It was common practice in the Malaysian police at the time for officers not to call for backup or report incidents, which is why the officer on duty did not alert anyone about what had happened. A few days later, the purple Proton tiara belonging to Kenny Ong was found abandoned. Although the chase was unsuccessful, the police now had identification documents left behind by the driver. The occupants of the car were identified as 27-year-old Ahmad Najib Benares and Kenny Ong. If the officer had acted differently, Kenny Ong might still be alive. Unfortunately, Ravichandran only reported the incident to his superiors after Kenny's body was discovered. The sole positive aspect of that fateful night was that the officer had managed to obtain documents on the suspect. In addition to Kenny's family, a large number of Malaysians attended her farewell ceremony. For Brandon, the loss of his beloved wife was an irreparable blow. Meanwhile, the police launched a manhunt for Ahmad Najib. Further investigation revealed that Ahmad Najib's address listed in his documents was false, but his name was genuine, making it possible to track him down through various means. The police searched for the name in the Registry of Documented Marriages and the National Agency of Social Support, and a match was found. Ahmad Najib Aris was born and raised in Muir, Malaysia, as the second of 4 siblings. Due to family financial constraints, he dropped out of school in 1998 to work and support his family. Later, he moved to Kuala Lumpur, got married, and had 2 children. Since 2000, he had been working as a cabin cleaner for Malaysia Airlines. Knowing his wife's name and her workplace, the police started monitoring her. Specifically, she worked at one of the metropolitan banks. After waiting for her shift to end, police officers in plain clothes followed her, thereby discovering her home address. Now the police knew Ahmad's residence, but to avoid alarming him, they needed to ensure he was inside the house. For 3 days, they kept the house under surveillance, but the suspect failed to appear. The investigators began to suspect that Ahmad Najib might no longer live with his family, but this was a premature conclusion. On the 4th day of surveillance, around 4 a.m., a taxi pulled up to the house and Ahmad Najib got out of it. Within a minute, he was handcuffed and taken to the police station for questioning. News of the arrest and the suspect's identity quickly spread to the press. Many people who knew Ahmad Najib were shocked to learn that he was responsible for kidnapping and murdering Kenny Ong. To them, he appeared to be a devoted husband and caring father of 2, giving the impression of a good person. However, as the investigation unfolded, officers came to realize that Ahmad was not what he seemed. During his initial interrogation, Ahmad remained calm and insisted on speaking only with the head of the Criminal Investigation Division. However, as evidence mounted against him, he began to deny his involvement. The turning point came when he was presented with 2 identification cards that he had given to the duty officer on the night of Kenny's kidnapping. Furthermore, the police found bloodstains on his jacket and jeans, which they claimed would likely match Kenny's DNA. It was only when Ahmad realized that the officers had irrefutable proof that he finally confessed to kidnapping and murdering Kenny Ong. 10 days after the kidnapping on June 23, 2003, Ahmad was brought to court, where he reaffirmed his confession. In the following days, the police conducted an investigation, during which Ahmad reenacted the crime, showing them all the locations where he had been with Cani and detailing how he forcibly made her have sex with him, killed her, and attempted to dispose of her body. The police found corroborating evidence at the underground parking lot where the crime began. Security cameras had captured Ahmad Najib waiting for his former boss, whom he allegedly wanted to take revenge on, although this motive was never confirmed. Lying in wait, Ahmad saw Cani searching for something in her car and decided to take advantage of the situation. He pushed her into the car, threatening her that if she tried to escape or call for help, she would face consequences. Cani became dazed and complying with his orders, and Ahmad then got into the driver's seat and sped out of the parking lot. Having stopped in an industrial area, Ahmad started harassing Cani. But just then, a plainclothes police officer pulled up to the car. According to Ahmad, he managed to escape the pursuit, and although the officer had his documents, he didn't let Cani go. Later, Ahmad stopped his car on the street to replace a flat tire, which had been punctured by a bullet. As he stopped, he noticed a woman sitting in a parked car nearby. He approached her, asking to borrow a jack to change the tire, but then saw Cani signaling the woman with her hands, who handed him the jack. Ahmad gave up on changing the tire and drove off immediately. A bit later, Ahmad Najib Aris stopped at an isolated location where he threatened Cani with a knife and forced her to have intimate relations with him. Afterwards, he drove to another area where he once again forced Cani to comply with his demands. Both Ahmad and Cani were in the back seat, and Cani was pleading for mercy, but instead, he took her life. He then hid her body in a manhole near a highway, drove the car to another location, and abandoned it. It wasn't until 16 hours later that he returned to the scene, armed with a gasoline canister, in an attempt to destroy evidence of the crime. A DNA analysis confirmed that the semen found inside Cani's body matched Ahmad Najib Aris. His DNA was also found in the car, as were his fingerprints, which provided irrefutable proof of his guilt. The analysis also revealed that the blood found on his jacket and jeans belonged to Cani. The trial commenced on September 15, 2003, a mere 3 months after Cani's death. This case became one of the most contentious in Malaysia, garnering significant attention from the media and the public. This high-profile trial drew in not only ordinary Malaysians and journalists, but also individuals seeking to capitalize on the situation, including a surplus of attorneys representing Ahmad. Although Ahmad confessed to his crimes during the investigation, and there was substantial evidence, including DNA evidence, he didn't plead guilty at his first trial. Instead, he claimed that his confession was made under police pressure. However, the judge who took Ahmad's confession shortly after his arrest testified that Ahmad showed no signs of physical abuse and appeared calm and relaxed at the time. Later, Ahmad's attorneys shifted their focus, arguing that the victim, Cani, was in the car with Ahmad voluntarily. They claimed that Cani, a black belt in Taekwondo, didn't try to escape, implying that she wasn't being held against her will. However, this argument was dismissed, as people respond differently in critical situations. Undeterred, the defense team presented another version, suggesting that Cani had engaged in consensual sex with Ahmad and died accidentally from strangulation, which they claimed was used to enhance sensations during the act. However, forensic experts challenged and denied this theory. The cloth around Cani's neck was tied in multiple knots, suggesting that Ahmad had no intention of untying it. In fact, the cloth was tied so tightly that the skin underneath was the only undamaged area on the body, as it was protected from the fire. Moreover, the cloth was specifically designed for wiping airplane windows, and given that the defendant worked as a cabin cleaner, this connection further implicated him in the crime. At this point, Ahmad's lawyers were out of options and advised him to remain silent and not testify. Many people wondered why Canny didn't escape from the car when she had at least 2 opportunities to do so. Unfortunately, we will never know the answer, as it's possible that she was paralyzed with fear and unable to flee. On February 23, 2005, Ahmad Najib Aris was convicted on all charges related to the crime against Canny's sexual integrity. The judge concluded that the evidence pointed to Ahmad as the sole perpetrator. Ahmad was sentenced to 20 years in prison and 10 strokes of the cane, the highest penalty allowed under Malaysian law. Additionally, he was sentenced to death for taking Canny's life. In Malaysia, the method of execution differs significantly from that in the USA, where lethal injection is used. In Malaysia, a more cost-effective method is employed, involving ropes instead of expensive drugs. Ahmad's legal team made 2 unsuccessful attempts to appeal the sentence. In 2010, Ahmad wrote to the head of state requesting that his death sentence be commuted to life imprisonment. Although he reiterated his claim of innocence in the letter, his request for clemency was denied. On September 23, 2016, more than 13 years after Canny's death, the 40-year-old Ahmad Najib was put to death, carrying out his sentence.